This is perhaps the biggest myth when it comes to driving, and in particular when it comes to speeding. Many of you might have heard of the 10% plus 2 rule. Now, straight away, there's a problem there, because this is not a rule as such. It's guidance, and it's only guidance, and it's not your guidance. So allow me to explain. So many people believe that this is built into legislation as a 10% tolerance or a 10% plus 2 tolerance when it comes to speeding. And I've even heard police officers previously say that it's built into legislation, which is not really correct at all with respect to them. But it does provide some kind of an understanding as to how the police will deal with speeding offences, but there is a very strict understanding that I hope to convey to you in this video. But first of all, if you are new to me, I'm a barrister of England and Wales. I'm Daniel Shensmith. Please do subscribe as that helps my channel grow. So let's take a look at some useful tables here. So first of all, we've got the speeding on the left-hand side, speed limit rather, Freudian slip on the left-hand side. 20, 30, 40, 50, etc. Now, if we look at the middle column as a 10% limit above the limit, we get at the bottom end not a great deal above the speed limit, albeit strictly speaking it is above the speed limit, but then up to 70, 77 is quite a bit more than 70. So those of you that drive at 70 will know that 77 is pushing it that little bit more. And so, for example, if you're doing 70 and you have a vehicle pass you at 77, they will move past you relatively quickly, or it will feel relatively quickly. Now, if we look at 10% plus 2, then that takes that up to 79 at the top end, which is obviously almost 80. And so when someone passes you at almost 80 when you're doing 70, that does feel rather quick. Now, the important thing to note here is that these are not built into legislation. The law and the rules, the real rules, say if you are doing 21 in a 20 or 71 in a 70, you could technically be prosecuted for it. Now, I say technically prosecuted because almost always you will be given some sort of tolerance. And this is from the guidance from the National Police Chiefs Council. Now, there's an old table that I refer to now, which I can't find at the moment, so I don't know if this is currently accurate, but it certainly was then, and will probably provide some kind of guidance as to how they deal with it today. So let's take a look at this other table here. Now, this is interesting because this also builds in a device tolerance. Now, this table was built up, I think, from, well, it was one of the news companies, and they spoke to various police services around the country, and many of them responded and gave their guidance of speed limits here and so on. And some of them didn't respond, but this was a table built up of those that did respond. Now, of those that did respond, there was a device tolerance built into this table. A device tolerance referring to the detection device rather than your device. Although arguably you could argue that there's a tolerance on the speed of your own vehicle, but I don't think that gets very far in court these days. It is more geared towards the device tolerance itself. So a tolerance of 2 miles an hour and up to 3 miles an hour for speeds of 70 miles an hour is a device tolerance. Now, looking at jumping to the green columns, speed awareness, if appropriate, between these speeds. So if you're in a 20 and you're doing 24 to 31, you'll still be prosecuted, but offered an awareness course if it is appropriate. Now, it's only normally appropriate if you've not done one before, or it's a long time since you've done one and the police deem that it is appropriate to do so. And then you'll be offered that course instead of the points. And you pay for the course. I don't know what the current fee is, but you pay for the course. And so up at 70 miles an hour, you've got, if you're doing between 79 and 86, then you'll be offered an awareness course. Now, if you've done one recently or you've done one before and therefore it's not appropriate, then you'll be given the fixed penalty. And the fixed penalty, if we look at, again, at the top end at 70 miles an hour, you'll be issued the fixed penalty at 79 miles an hour, which I think is quite a bit over the speed limit for 70 miles an hour. I think on the motorways, with the amount of traffic, the volume of traffic on the motorways these days, I think 70 is perfectly adequate. In fact, I don't do that much traveling by car, but when I am traveling by car, I think it's quite a good journey, quite a lucky journey to be able to maintain 70 for a good chunk of the journey regardless. unless I'm going a long distance and it's a long stretch of motorway. But otherwise, I think you do well to stay at 70 without all the roadworks and the temporary speed restrictions and so on. But you can rant about that in the comments perhaps. But if you're doing 70 on the motorway, I think that's perfectly adequate. But then if you are above it, if you are caught doing above it, now I'm not advocating that you should. Obviously, you should stick to the speed limits. But if you are caught above the speed limit, this old table was guidance that you'll be given a fixed penalty of 79 miles an hour. Now, in the cases that are decided to be more serious, that you'll go straight to court, do not pass go, are in the pinky purple column on the right-hand side. So if you're in a 20 mile an hour zone, 35 miles an hour is enough to send you to court because that's 15 above the limit. 30 would be 50, so that's obviously 20 miles an hour above the limit. Jumping to 70 miles an hour, 96 miles an hour, so close to 100, you can expect yourself be summoned to court. And anything over 100, you are almost certainly going to court for it and you'll be heavily punished for it. So over 100 miles an hour is an insta-court, as I like to think of that. So this video really is to highlight some of the points that I've seen argued about the 10% plus 2 rule. I'd like everyone to not refer to it as a rule because that gives people the false sense of security and the false impression that it is a rule that police have to follow or even courts have to follow, and they don't. You can be prosecuted and convicted, for example, or doing 21 in a 20. Now that's unlikely because of the device tolerance, and it is arguable that there'll be a device tolerance even at 20. And I presume, I mean, these devices are fairly accurate, but I presume that the faster you're going, the bigger the tolerance, etc. Albeit that doesn't give a huge amount of leeway, even up at 70 miles an hour when we look at the device tolerance of being 73. But don't think of this as a rule. Because if you think of it as a rule, then you'll go out thinking, well, I am quite okay to be in a 50 zone, anything up to 57 before you're going to be prosecuted, which is, of course, 10% plus 2. Remember, if we come back to the very simplified table here, we've got 10% and 10% plus 2. And so the 10% plus 2, anything up to 57, if you go out thinking that you're perfectly fine with anything up to 57, you may well be disappointed if you are pulled over by police at doing, say, 54, and you are prosecuted, given a fixed penalty and so on, which obviously then has a knock-on effect on your insurance. And in recent years, insurance companies have taken every opportunity to increase their premiums, and speed is one very easy factor with which to do so. So they will say that if you've been convicted of speeding, even if it is an SP30, which is speeding in a 30, that can have a knock-on effect on your insurance premiums. And another sideline here is it is extremely important that you don't try to pull any swift tactics to get out of these points and have someone else take these points for you. Because if you try to have, let's say, your spouse or significant other, your friend's license endorsed with these points that you have actually or should legally have incurred, then if it's discovered, now we've had real cases come to us where people have been prosecuted for perverting the course of justice. And obviously being prosecuted for perverting the course of justice is a very much more serious offence than the speeding was, even if it was 79 or 70 or whatever it might be. So if you are in any way at all tempted to have a spouse or someone else take the points for you, think again, don't do it, just take the points, take the hit and get on with your life. Because otherwise you'll end up in the Crown Court and it is a very much more serious offence than the original speeding. So take this as a guidance of the biggest, probably the biggest perpetuated myth in driving history. Make sure you subscribe to my channel, and as always, thank you for watching.